On the x-axis, we're going to have certainty and the certainty of outcome. And on the y-axis, we're going to have ubiquity. You're almost having to make those decisions when you're in the stable platform that you thought you were going to grow on. A smell cannot lie, because that fundamentally challenges that whole perception of the way we see the world versus the way a machine might see the world.
This is After the Magic, a limited series podcast in which Gam Diaz and Sergio Maldonado will discuss the impact of agentic AI on various industries. Gam and Sergio have grown up professionally in a world in which Forrester Research, or Gartner, threw its famous Magic Quadrant, determined, as it by divine designation, the most impactful or advanced technology vendors. It occurred to them that the explosion of startups and competing technologies called for a very different approach to telling the signal from the noise. And it had to begin with two basic principles: unsponsored realism and extreme curiosity. At the same time, every analysis was to be mapped to human values and individual agency. And it is with that mission that they are now humbly bidding for a few minutes of your time. Please bear with us as we polish this over time, but we do hope that you find it valuable and, in a way, unique.
Okay, how to introduce Tony Fish, our guest today. Besides things that are well known to many, like the books he's written, his role as an investor, or his successful career as an entrepreneur. At the risk of sounding grandiose, but please bear with me, as there's probably no better way to describe him, if you combine Benjamin Franklin, Socrates, and Ernest Shackleton, you can craft a polymath entrepreneur who can invent and invest, who makes people uncomfortable by asking questions they didn't know they needed to answer, and someone who thrives in impossible, uncertain conditions, but will lead everyone home safely. And all of this makes him an ideal guest for After the Magic. Let's start. Tony, welcome to After the Magic.
Sergio and Gam, thank you very much.
Gam, good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
All right. Where do we start, Gam?
So, I know that Tony, like, as always, has been thinking more deeply than anybody about things. And the thing that feels like AI or generative AI is going so fast, it is out accelerating itself. And what seems to be getting left behind is due process, governance, things like fault tolerance, all the things that allow an enterprise to continue functioning stably, continuity of business. And so Tony's been thinking an awful lot about this. So I think he's going to be a great addition to our conversations as to governance in particular.
All right. So where do we start? How do you see governance as it applies to these new changes, Tony?
I'm going to start with plagiarizing the S-curve of emergence, or what was the classically the S-curve of adoption, which most people will know. But I'm going to change the axes on the S-curve. So the way the classic S-curve goes is performance or value over time, or market penetration over time, and you end up with this classic curve that people know about. It you go. I'm going to nick Simon Wardley's ideology of using this S-curve, which is on the x-axis, we're going to have certainty and the certainty of outcome. And on the y-axis, we're going to have ubiquity. So at the 0, 0 place, basically you have zero certainty of outcome, and ubiquity means everything's novel. Now, that to everybody is a place which is chaotic, it's innovative, it's creative, it's where all the new sparks come from. At the other end of that S curve of certainty and ubiquity is where the certainty is extremely high. You know what you're going to get. So when you turn the tap on, you get water. When you switch the gas on, you can light it. When you switch the electrics on, you get electricity. So there's certainty of outcome. And ubiquity means everybody's got it. It's completely common. So, the utilities market. And at that level of certainty and ubiquity, everything is linear. And we're extremely good at managing linear because it's very stable. There's very little change. And there's this S curve which goes between that chaotic world and the linear world. We're very good at governance in the linear world. And to Gam's point, where AI is, it's this chaotic world where you cannot apply those stable forms of understanding. And because you haven't got that level of stability, governance at that early stage is different. And it's the classic problem of startups. Governance you do in startups is fundamentally different to the governance you do in transition, which is different to the governance you do at growth, and which is different to the governance you do at linear. But we carry on taking the linear ideologies and trying to apply them to this chaotic world. Hope that made sense.
One of the things I get asked a lot is, as the technology is moving so fast, how do you decide on your platform and your stack? It's almost the same question and sorry, the answer that I sometimes give is, well, software has always moved and the organization has built a way to continually upgrade and continually enhance. But it's getting almost too fast to do that. And so what we need to build is something very dynamic in terms of how we platform. Do you think in the chaotic world of governance, or governing a chaotic world where the landscape is changing on a continual basis, is it possible to build a dynamic governance system?
I want to start out by saying, in the old world, the issue of transitioning of governance and the transitioning of technology and picking which technology stack you had, you lived in a chaotic world, but it was the transition from where you had to grow up from incredibly early stage growth, early stage company with innovative idea and nothing provable, to you've got your first product and first customer, to growth, to your ubiquity. It was the transitions that mattered to which technology stack you had. And therefore, the way we tended to think about technology stacks was at the transition point. So you built on anything, you transitioned, you grew up, you grew on that till it came to an end, you transitioned, and it was the transitioning you had to think. What you pointed out, which is why I said that, is that suddenly it is not a transition point where you have to make a decision. You're almost having to make those decisions when you're in the stable platform that you thought you were going to grow on. That's different. And I don't think many people have realized it's not about transitioning anymore. It's actually about business every single day is going through a transition. So we don't have those stable moments where we can pick something.
Being human, we like to kind of relate things to our close experience. And the law and governance is something that is one of the stable things. The law is very busy trying to maintain status quo. And when it doesn't, it moves very slowly and tries to be very robust in its transition. And so this continuous change is not a very human condition. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's something we've forgotten how to do.
So this was the second part of the answer. So the governance infrastructure we had was based on that idea of linear, where you have ubiquity and certainty. And therefore you could spend, come back to your committee once a year. You could do a 3-year business plan. You could spend the time sitting in committee meetings, working out what the next committee meeting was going to do, and then set the agenda actually for a year away, because you had this level of linearity about what was happening. And I think what you're identifying and what I'm agreeing with is that artificial intelligence, or governing artificial intelligence, we cannot persist in trying to govern it as a problem to be solved, as a practice to be lived. And because we like problems to be solved, because that's the way we so often come to it, we don't like it when somebody says this is a practice that has to be lived on a daily basis, and that what you decided yesterday could become untrue tomorrow.
That's the thing. And it's breaking every organization, every company, because we're not used to this thing. The whole organization is built around stability, and we cannot cope. Even individuals, we're struggling with continuous change. Transition is the norm. And so now you sort of make this variable exponential. You've got all of these people interacting where nobody can rest. It's a lot of pressure for us as human beings. So you see companies either doing nothing, right? Hoping for this thing to be, as you were saying, just a stage that they can go through by deploying a new piece of technology. Let's bring the chatbots. Let's bring Accenture with the chatbots. And then we'll hold the fire for another 2 years, because that's how we work. We plan, a few exercises in advance. It's breaking the company. So my question would be, would this reshape the way organizations are built?
Quite honestly, Sergio, I think it's an insightful question which people don't want to answer, because we have a structure called the limited liability company. And, let's whiz back in a bit of history, which was, 1600s, they had a particular problem, which meant the stock companies made a huge amount of sense. And when we got to the 1800s, that old structure didn't quite work for the new things, which was we had to build railways and telephones and infrastructure and roads and all sorts of other things. So we created the limited liability vehicle. 200 years on, we're still using that vehicle, having kind of like mashed it around a million times to try and make it work. But what AI is doing is saying, actually, the fundamental structure we have as companies is probably the thing that's breaking. Now, we see it breaking through governance. We see it breaking through decision making. We see it breaking through a number of different things, but we won't question the foundation. And to me, we got to start questioning what vehicle we need to enable us to go and do this stuff, as opposed to retrofitting something that's not working into something that's broken. And so I think actually there's a massive structural problem, which may actually slow down AI's ability to come and timing right now until we sort out the structural issues.
Do you have an example of something that a company would do with AI that needs to be governed, where the old system is clearly not going to work? Don't need an answer, but just a problem. Even though you said we're not talking about problems.
The difficulty is most people come to AI believing that it can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of marketing, operations, HR, finance, every other division, even our security levels, our development levels. And they basically come in with a very thick deck, an easily provable ROI, that if you use this tech on the existing infrastructures, it will make it more efficient and more effective. And I think one of the observations It's back to the Kodak story, which everybody kind of like loves, along with the Nokia story and many others, where there was this monstrous failure, and we've done case studies about why they all failed. And the point that was always in the case studies is that Nokia knew the smartphone was about to come along. It had all the evidence, all the anthropological studies, absolutely everything, but they didn't listen to it. Kodak had digital camera technology huge, nearly 20 years ahead of when digital cameras came along. The organizations, for whatever reason, decided to park the technologies because it would have cannibalized their existing businesses and what they believed. But when the opportunity came to use something that they already knew, they missed it. Because I would argue they went down the efficiency and effectiveness path of current governance infrastructures, which is to remove the old processes, the old thinking, the old methodologies. Everything that was coupled to where they came from was seen as errors and mistakes. And in the drive to efficiency and effectiveness, the best ROI, you want to get rid of all those teams and the learnings. So they park them. When the timing came along, these things were right. No, there was no memory. And then suddenly you'll find that they've lost. So if we come to where AI is, what becomes really interesting is that a lot of the AI case studies that people are going for is efficiency and effectiveness, losing more and more of the old, losing the memory, driving things out to become hyper efficient and hyper effective. Yet the survivors who came through COVID-19 were all those who had the old memories. They knew how to do stuff irrespective when everything else broke. They were the people who actually already had the mutation for COVID-19. There was lots of evidence that actually our history was way more important than the efficiency. So the question's right, which is what we're going to do differently. Optimizing for efficiency and effectiveness, which is our current structure and methodology, I think is the thing that we're going to see break. And that's a massive change because most of us are wedded to that model.
I love that because it's sort of, it would say that a company with a soul, with roots, with history, with memory, would prevail over short-term thinking and quarter-to-quarter optimization and CFO ruling the day. CFOs ruling the day. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
What do you think, Gab?
I've been thinking about fire recently. Not only is AI spreading like fire, I feel we're at a moment that is very similar to when we harnessed fire. I mean, there have always been decisions. Now we've found out a way for decisions to be made by a machine. But we're at the point where we've just figured out, oh yeah, fire, this is great. We can keep ourselves warm in the winter. We can scare away animals and we can cook our food. Great. But we haven't yet got to the point where we are boiling water and putting it in a compressed container and inventing steam and the steam engine, or applying fire to petrochemicals that explode, or applying fire to rock and smelting metal. I don't know how long it took us to go from cooking food to smelting metal, but I feel we're still cooking food with AI. We're still doing the things we know what to do. We haven't figured out the derivatives.
I think that's a really nice way of saying it. Yes. Now, I'd give the example of that as if you go through, which is, because people died, we learned how to cook food properly. Because people died in smelting, when we finally discovered it, we ended up with better processes. We're coming into a world that's incredibly risk adverse. Now, I'm not suggesting we should start, putting people out and slaughtering them to the machines, but we've got to find a way, if we're going to improve, much like we did improve, in a different way. And I think that's part of our struggle, because not technically who's going to die, because that's not a good outcome. Okay. But we've got to take that same process. But what does it look like for us to go through that process such that you can discover everything you said?
We have AI,
I know.
and AI will allow us to simulate the death. So what we do is we apply AI and we allow it to run free to play, and the AI will come up with a spectrum of outcomes, and we can't discard the ones that we don't like. We've got to keep them because they're the ones that are going to guide us in our governance.
And we,
So
and we got the Minecraft one run by MIT, and there's a few others that have been done where we put these AI agents into environments. And guess what? They kill people, they rob, they steal, they do all the human behaviors, and then you end up with people then effectively they create their own police. And it's like a fascinating human piece that, yeah, I totally agree. What I'm doing is agreeing with you, Big Am. The simulations themselves are creating the simulations of humanity.
you said that we've invented AI and AI uses the currency of words. So when we had, I mean, the computers use the currency of ones and zeros. Our AI uses the currency of words. What would have happened if dogs had invented AI? Would AI work on smell and molecules? And would it be far richer and far more accurate? Because a smell can't lie. Very tangential thought, but
I've actually got to write that one down. A smell cannot lie. That's a really interesting piece, but I wanted to unpack at length. I think what's interesting for me is um, when we look at the AI models that people have done, particularly around Minecraft, where they've set these agents off, the one that they propagate is a single scenario where people do kill people and people end up policing because it looks like it's human and it looks like our own history reforming. They're actually running thousands and thousands of these models, but you've heard of one. This is what I find interesting. We like the one that follows what we've done. We want to reject the other 99,999, which don't look like us. And there I find the conflict starts, which is we took a certain path and we ended up with what we've got. The agentic models can take many paths. They don't necessarily come to how we've ended up working the way we work. And we are, the paradigm attachment problem I always come back to. We are wedded to the way we are. And we don't like it if there was a different model. Fundamentally, we find it all a bit scary. Yet, I think to Gam's point, which is the insightful piece, is a smell cannot lie, because that fundamentally challenges that whole perception of the way we see the world versus the way a machine might see the world. I know it's a bit philosophical, but actually, we should not ask the machines to replicate what we've done.
Exactly. And there's this conflict out there between every company trying to maintain the status quo and everybody trying to hold on to their jobs and their routines because you want to have a life and you want that routine, you want that stability. Perhaps that's the only way you can be human. I don't know. You have your family, you need to pay your mortgage, you need to do all of these things. So you keep showing up at work, and you are hoping for everything to more or less stay the same. And at the same time, we're saying that if a new kind of company, if that's the name, if a new kind of productive unit, an atomized kind of body, which is built out of maybe parts of our time, not even our entire time, something that breaks the entire system, right? Where we are all not even productive units, right? But clusters of productive units, every one of us, that if that could really beat every other legacy organization, the companies that we know today, going back to this idea, or the limited liability company and so on. That would really force everyone to change. So sometimes I do think that could be coming.
I'm still on a smell cannot lie, and I'm going to come back to the crazy idea because it's the example of the big fat banana or the big yellow banana, big white banana, which is the one that died out under the banana disease, and that's the banana flavor that all banana sweets have. But nobody obviously can taste it because all the bananas died out. And actually, therefore, all banana flavors appear to be a lie. And actually, all the banana flavors have never been near a banana. The same as all strawberry flavors have never been near a strawberry. So can a smell lie? Absolutely. In fact, going through it, actually, natural gas is odorless, but we put a flavor into it so you can smell it. Yeah. So yeah, we have a compounding in problem of how the earth will AI see us. And it's one of these things that I've kind of pondered on that, particularly in Western society, obviously we have the idea in religion that God created. And we then look back at God and create these attributes of God. So omnipotent, all-knowing, all-seeing, all this. And because if they can't have those characteristics, how can God be God? It's a rhetorical question, but it's how we end up with the God, because it has to have these characteristics and it's a QED. Now, AI, we've created it. How will AI look back at us as its creator? Does it look back at us? So this back to this language problem to me, which you were asking, which is, will it actually use the same language, or actually does it want to try and do something different?
Oh, that's very good. That's looking at it from the perspective of the AI. So we are the creator. How does it describe us? Does it look up to it? And does it guide how it evolves? Because it uses humans as sort of the guiding light. So the Almighty is the human, and that's the point of reference. That'd be terrible.
And then it looks at all the flaws in humans and say, well, they can't have created me because I'm better than humans. How isn't it? Yeah, we got some really interesting moral problems coming up, which I think we don't really want to face. And I know they sound philosophical and they sound but they're not. These are the real issues. So back to the beginning of this conversation, we're going to face these questions coming at pace. Once upon a time, you had 1,000 years to think about this, and actually nobody really cared. Reality is you might have now 6 months to think about this stuff. And if you haven't got an opinion, you might be building a piece of technology which is going to do this, which you haven't even thought about or agreed to. So you come back to the governance issues. You're making decisions about creating something which could have a detrimental value to human thinking because it optimizes for something you get the incentive for. But you're not prepared to consider the consequences on everybody else of your reward.
Yes, and that takes me back to your peak paradox. Sorry to repeat that. From decision making in uncertain times, where yes, you could be optimizing for yourself and you don't want to accept it. And you may want to really ponder what's the impact of optimizing for society at large or for your company. And it's a very difficult choice. People don't want to face difficult choices. So it's very good that we're forcing ourselves to think to start with.
It goes back to some of Gam's work and your work with on this AI agencies, both in travel industry and in insurance industry and banking, where what are those industries optimizing their AI agents to do, and the effect that will have on the consequences on other industries, which you're unpacking.
Tony, talk about weirdness, because I think if we keep hiring and promoting the same people, the norm, then we keep reinforcing what we're doing today. Where's the room for the weird folks?
Yeah, we like the weird. I'm the weird folk. Hands up, I'm the weird one. And I'm quite happy to be the weird one. I think this is this interesting problem we have, of what is diversity. And diversity is definitely gender, 100%, and we need equality. Diversity is race. Diversity is culture. And we need to equally value and balance all of them and hold each of them together as equal values and be able to work with the conflicts that creates for us. The next one is this piece that, which is neurodiversity, or the weird ones amongst us who think differently. So in so many ways, the ladies have been on a journey, the women, of probably over 100 years in trying to get equality, of which we've got a way there, nowhere near enough, and it's not good enough. Race reality is probably 50, 60 years. We've been on a journey of trying to get a much better equality and transparency about what it really means and where we go. We're nowhere near far enough. In terms of culture, we're only starting the journey of really trying to get to grips with different ideologies and cultures, and how we equally value them. And neurodiversity is just, it's emerging. It's right at the beginning of its story. And I think we've got a long way to go. I think the difference is, and it's back to this AI problem, which is the old way we could do things allowed 100 years of change. Several generations could create change. And suddenly we're going to ask one generation to make monumental leaps and changes, which I don't think we're preparing them for. We're unprepared in our education system of what the impacts of this is going to be. So we need the weird as part of the mix.
Absolutely. Governance, or data governance and AI governance, is following a pretty linear way. So back to where we started. People are looking at what they did in the past with I don't know, even data protection, and now applying it to AI governance. It's happening because the law is following the same patterns. So you look at compliance first, then you look at security, and that's what I see. Same kind of paperwork. It takes a couple of years to get ready to have all your inventory, everything that you are doing, the model cards. That's how AI is being governed. So from this traditional point of view, if things change as fast as they seem to be changing, then this would be useless, because you look at someone's card or someone's, sort of a nutrition label as to what kind of AI models they're using and so on, and everything is, again, it sort of disintegrates. Again, it evaporates in months. So what is a good way, practical way, Tony, for people not to go crazy and still be a bit bolder in terms of addressing governance, accepting that this is not the same thing, that we need to build for transition and not for static stages?
I've always liked, there's an affinity I have to nature. And one of nature's overlooked animals is the bees, and the importance of the bees to humanity. But the bees also have this amazing life, which is, a honeybee particularly is only, I think it's ever 20 minutes from death. And so if it doesn't find pollen every 20 minutes or so, and it might be 2 hours, I can't quite remember, apologies. It's an incredibly short period of time. Why is this really important? Because in a bee colony, 80% of the bees follow the waggle dance, the figure of eight dance, and they go off to the same plants where they know there's nectar. So they got the chance of flying from where they were to go to get the nectar, which means obviously they get enough energy, they can come back. And they keep the hive growing. And the problem is, if all 100% of the bees did that, the reality is they'd run out of food. So 20% of the bees break the rules. They ignore the waggle dance. They risk death to go and find new sources of food. Now, the most interesting part of this is not 20% of the workforce are, breaking the rules. Actually, on any one day, a bee can be absolutely faithful and follow the waggle dance and go off and get its normal stuff. And the next moment it breaks the rules and goes off. But the next moment it comes back and does the same thing. And it's this, these hives have this incredible flexibility of, to survive, they need everybody to do different things continuously. But the majority try and keep the stability, which keeps the hive warm and fed and everything else that goes with it. But they've got sufficient rule breakers that they can always find new food and water. And we seem to not have this ability in our governance ruling and in what we're thinking about AI, that there's enough stability and enough rule breaking. And I'm not sure where the balance is, because I don't really agree with the 80-20 rule, but that's a whole different story. But it's this, that any one bee on any one day can be everything, where we humans seem to be, if you're a chief marketing officer, you're a chief marketing officer today, tomorrow, and next week. You're a CTO today, yesterday, and tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't seem to have this this functionality that people have, which we then tie to our identities, seems to prevent us from going, do you know what, we've got to be flexible. And so I think the next stage of us is, how do we become more flexible if we're going to deliver the governance, if we're going to deliver AI?
We can bring that back to what you said about death and how people died as we discovered new things. And we don't like dying. And we tend to not reward systems that have the simulation have us die. But in the bee colony, if we were building a simulation of a bee colony, then the level of death would be a measure of how much variance there was in the hive to go out and explore. And so it feels like, you've got this combination of instinct, a hive mind, and a variance. And if AI goes in the direction I think it might, is we will build complex simulators for organizations and ecosystems. And maybe the traits that you've just explored there are the fundamentals of those digital twin ecosystems, that they have instinct, they have a hive mind to allow the ecosystem to thrive. They reward variance, but to adopt it, we've got to understand sacrifice. So what does that mean? Let's just figure out, what does that mean for an organization today? What can they do? What's the one thing that they need to shift?
The one thing you need to shift. For me, there's a million different companies doing a million different things. You picking out one thing that's universally acceptable to everybody is pretty difficult. But I think there's one thing that so many companies do, which means we keep following the same path. And the thing we do is we've created some form of key performance indicator or some form of objective to which your bonus is tied. And irrespective of if it's still a good idea, people will do everything to deliver their KPI to earn their bonuses. And therefore we have a path dependency, that if AI comes along and says, well, that's a stupid thing for you doing 3 months into or 6 weeks or 6 hours into the new KPI, it don't matter, you're going to do it for a year, because that's how you earn your bonus. And if we can find a way to break some of these performance indicators, I think we will be in a lot healthier state to be able to deliver flexibility. We've created a rigid infrastructure around reward and remuneration, which is inflexible to the world we're going into.
Very good. Let's attack those OKRs, KPIs first. Fantastic. Tony, thank you very much. Thank you. You give us a lot of food for thought.
Oh, thank you. You make me think.
Glad.
I only think because you ask me questions, so I'm always grateful.
On demand. But maybe we need kind of a little bit more religion and moral code. And I was just wondering, maybe we should have some sort of, I don't know, a chaplain for every company to steer
Very
us.
good.
Um, you might probably take it out of the record, but so I should give you MR and a couple of other people like David Cashman who are ministers or ethicists who help organizations do some of this stuff. But yeah, I'd agree. You need somebody who provides a moral compass.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
After the Magic is produced by Gam Diaz and Sergio Maldonado. AI voiceovers are generated with 11 Labs. This show accepts no sponsors, but you are welcome to reach out to our hosts if you believe you have a mission worth their time. Find them at afterthemagic.com.